Hi, this is Britta Glade. I'm Senior Director of Content and Curation for RSA Conference, and I'm here today with Dr. Hugh Thompson, who's Program Chair for RSA Conference. Good to see you, Hugh.
Hey, Britta, great to see you. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Really appreciate it.
Indeed, we have completed the agenda build process for RSA Conference, at least the preliminary stages. You'll continue to see additional things added as we go on. Our program committee did some Herculean work going through almost 2,000 submissions from the community. And wow, what quality we saw with the submissions that came through.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing. I wanted to start with a huge thank you to the security community. Just the level of energy and effort that went into submissions this year was unbelievable. I really think it was the strongest submission set that we've ever had, and that's saying something for RSA conference. But I don't know, to me, it spoke to a willingness to share, to participate, to be a part of the community. And I know these are very, very challenging times for a lot of folks out there in our community and really in every community. So I can't thank you enough for all of the effort and energy. And I will say it has tortured our program committee to get down to the final selection of sessions. So much good stuff, so much great content.
Actually, Hugh, that's where I want to start. The challenge that this year has been for everyone. Um, and thematically against that, in a year where the theme for RSA conference, which was determined a while ago, is resilience. Talk to me about what we saw within the submissions from that, because it did really bubble up to an uber trend of resilience.
Absolutely. Geez, I don't think there could be a better theme for this conference, and maybe for the past 12 months, just in general, even outside of security. But we're seeing it invade the sessions, the discussion topics. If you think about an enterprise, the security organization is effectively the organization that's responsible for resilience. And I think what we've seen, and certainly what we've seen through the submissions, is that you, the security community, have been incredibly resilient yourselves, but you've also made businesses very resilient at a time when they've had to transition how they do work. So we saw a lot of very interesting, I'd say, subtopics within resilience. We saw a lot of discussion about securing the remote workforce. In fact, we've got an entire track dedicated to it, just based on the submissions that we've had come in, and they're varied. It's not just, hey, how do you set up best practices for a remote workforce? It's, what are the human implications of securing folks that are now in an environment that you can't control as an enterprise? And, I love the combination of human oriented things as well as technology oriented things around resilience. But we're seeing that topic woven in everywhere.
Exactly. And actually using that one as a pivot to the next theme I'd like to discuss, which is that in and around supply chain, there was that really interesting submission, which is on our agenda, that looked at the geopolitical tensions on supply chain resilience. And that becomes a really interesting mashup in the world that we find ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about supply chains, software integrity and security. We had a lot of discussion at the program committee level on software bill of materials, which is something thematically we've been tracking for a while. What did you see from that standpoint in the trends?
Geez, it's pretty interesting. So let me just set the stage for you. Think about when the call for speakers closed for RSA conference. This is pre-SolarWinds, right? But yet we had an amazing amount of content that was on these topics that have been building for years and years in the fabric of the conference. Software bill of materials was a big one, very interesting one. Even more interesting now in light of SolarWinds. Britta talked about a session that we have that's all around sovereignty, basically, but not of data, of where is the equipment coming from? How can we have confidence and faith? And you'll see that this also is translating to a huge surge in topics like zero trust, SASE. Like, what do we do to connect from individual or trusted entity to trusted entity when we don't trust the things that may sit in between? So it's very fascinating, but I'd say everything around software security, product security, application security. This has been a hugely maturing area inside of RSA conference for years now. And I think we've got a lot of great content talking to some of the submitters that have been accepted after SolarWinds. There will be quite a bit of content at the conference around implants and some of the scary challenges and strategies just around this topic. Really fascinating.
Indeed. Yeah, both at the track level and the keynote stage level, giving people that actionable guidance of, this happened, what do I do? How do I plan? We've even got some, hands-on labs that'll give people an opportunity to get in and touch, do things themselves, understanding. Let's shift then to a discussion in and around information manipulation. So this is one, we've been tracking since the, hashtag fake news, which of course, even kids use in conversation anymore. Um, we not surprisingly saw a continued exploration of that. Last year with our theme in and around human element, we got into that, the psychology behind it, some of the, what makes us manipulatable as humans. But we did see a continued drumbeat in and around information manipulation.
Oh, it's such a huge topic. I mean, it's been politicized, I would say, over the last year, maybe over the last couple of years, but it is a very material reality for those of us that work in information security. Think about what used to be a standard business email compromise, right? You would get an email coming in and, it's to somebody in finance and it's got a great story around why you should wire a set of money right away. Today, some of those attacks involve deep fakes and calls from apparently the CEO when it's actually not. And it's something that a machine learning model, an adversarial model that was trained on some video or audio that's out there. And we're seeing a lot of interesting discussions in the security space of how do we address this on scale? Like, how do we actually deal with this problem around the provenance of data? And it's a societal level issue. And I think you'll see some really interesting sessions on that. But it's also a very practical one if you're in an enterprise and you're responsible for security, compliance, and governance. So we've got some very practical sessions around how do you deal with this new form of VEC, where maybe it's not an E in the middle of email. Maybe it's through the phone. Maybe it's through messaging. Maybe it's even through social media. How could you defend the enterprise against attacks that are just trying to change the way that you think? And I personally love this topic. Many of you have seen my closing keynote shows over the last few years where this is featured very, very prominently. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that will impact us, and you'll see a lot of fantastic insights from folks during this year's conference.
Yeah, definitely. And I know at the program committee level, we were talking about BEC attacks actually, and it's a we continue to have them, just like ransomware. There's going to be, and we don't have time to cover ransomware as a theme, but there's a lot on ransomware.
That's so
There's a, that BEC, it's no longer the Nigerian prince. Now it's a COVID vaccination element. So again, tying back to the themes of the year and how quickly that's been applied by the attackers, by the adversary in different ways that we've had to respond to. Um, for our remaining little bleep, let's visit information sharing. This is another one that we as a program committee have talked about, the ebbs and tides of this thematically. Burst onto the themes, onto the scene several years ago. We had a lot in and around information sharing. We had frameworks set up. We had information being passed. We were drafting off of what was done within FS-ISAC. And then it kind of went away for a little while. It seems to be back in force this year in the submissions that came in with, again, some really grounded, actionable, solid guidance for organizations approaching information sharing.
I want to say a month ago during the holidays, I was bored one morning and came in, and many of you that have seen my talks know that I have 5 young kids, so maybe I was sort of just escaping in a corner, but looking at some of the agendas from 15 years ago, 14 years ago, 13 years ago. Information sharing's always been a big topic at RSA conference. But it's fascinating how those sessions would go for a long time. It's a panel that's in agreement that we should share more, and we should share between the public and the private sector, and we should share among the private sector and among the public sector. But I would say only in these last 5 years or so have we seen a materialization of that, common ways to describe things, languages, protocols, schemas that we can use to share indicators of compromise and threat data. And the feeling to me of the information sharing sessions that we've got this year are very, very practical. It's how are we getting information from other folks in our industry? How are we leveraging the ISACs? How are we feeding into those kinds of organizations? And there's several on how security vendors are sharing with each other, which is another area that's matured very, very well. And also some very interesting information from the government. We saw a lot of government submissions, not just the US government, but all over the world, on how they are trying to better share information in a more timely way with companies and potential victims and providers. So a lot of information will be shared on sharing information.
Excellent. Which brings us full circle, I think, back to the theme, back to resilience, back to a commentary on our community and the goodness that exists within our RSA conference community, and people's willingness and interest in, again, delivering that really specific, actionable lessons learned. Here's where I stubbed my toe. Here's where I saw opportunity, and that really peppered across the agenda as a whole. I'm excited about the action that's going to be able to be taken based on the really wonderful education that our expert speakers will push forward. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you to our audience, and we really look forward to engaging with you at RSA conference this year.
Yeah, and I just want to add to Britta's comments. I can't tell you how proud I am to be a part of this security community. The resilience that you have shown over the last year is truly incredible. Think about the kind of pivots that your businesses, your organizations have had to make, that you have shepherded them through in a secure way. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for the time that you've dedicated to make RSA conference great by submitting. And a huge thank you to our program committee. These folks are volunteers. They're some of the brightest minds in the security space from every area in security. And they have truly given of themselves to put together an incredible program. So looking forward to virtually seeing you at RSA conference this year. And until then, be well and stay resilient.